I'm Scott Leadingham. Thanks for joining us here in the unique Northwest. Today we are with Austin Jenkins, Olympia correspondent. Thanks for joining us today, Austin.
Thanks for having me.
So Austin is just about to kick off the 2020 legislative session for the state of Washington, and he's here to preview it for us. So Austin, a lot on the docket. Let's talk about some of the major things that you're going to be watching. What's coming up?
Yeah, it's a short 60-day session in an election year, so we always say that the lawmakers are going to be highly motivated to get in and get out on time. But as you say, they've got a long list of things to potentially take up, including what to do about the passage of Initiative 976, the $30 car tabs measure that's blown a hole in their transportation budget. Of course, that's being challenged in the courts. There are proposals from the governor and the attorney general to ban so-called assault weapons and to also limit magazine capacity. These are not new ideas, but what is new is that the governor is getting behind them, and there is a new Speaker of the House who has been supportive of these sorts of gun control measures in the past. The question is, might she allow votes on these kinds of bills? A couple of other topics to be watching for: the potential for a vote to repeal the death penalty statute. We've already had the Supreme Court in this state rule our statute unconstitutional. We're not doing executions anymore, but there's an interest on the part of opponents of the death penalty in removing it from the books. Like just a couple of other topics, the biggest union in the state has come out with its agenda, and that includes a number of items, including secure scheduling, which would be to give employees at least 2 weeks advance notice of their schedule, especially people working in more of the fast food environment where their schedules change a lot.
Okay, so that's a lot to do in just 60 days. One of the big things, of course, as you mentioned, Initiative 976, that is really throwing a wrench into things because of how it funds transportation projects. And so I guess 2 points. One, has this really thrown a wrench into what they were otherwise planning to do this session? And two, has it made them think sort of long and hard about how fragile transportation funding is and try to fix it so it's not so dependent on one thing having, the stool kicked out from underneath it, like with car tabs?
Yeah, there's certainly, I think, a sense of, well, what if not car tabs, then what? If not the gas tax, which is a diminishing source of revenue for transportation projects, then what? So there are those longer term questions. For instance, vehicle miles driven. Could you charge people based on the number of miles they drive? Something that's been piloted, that's being talked about, but doesn't seem like it's ready for prime time. In the short term, they've got a several $100 million hole in their current transportation budget that they're going to have to come back and fix. And then you see all manner of proposals, many of which may be topics of discussion. I wouldn't necessarily predict action on in the 60-day session, many of them coming from Republicans to do things like take the sales tax revenue from automobile sales and put that into transportation, something that Democrats have long opposed doing. So yes, this will be a topic of conversation. They're going to probably do something about shoring up the budget, the transportation budget that is, but also keep in mind that this initiative is still subject to an ongoing court battle. It's before the Supreme Court, and certainly opponents are hoping that they may get a win in court.
But on that note, Governor Jay Inslee, of course, has long made a lot of his notoriety and his agenda about climate and environmental issues. So I wonder if he's going into this legislative session hoping that a certain set of bills passes or to champion those bills and then use that to run against for his third term as part of his record. So what are those sorts of bills that he's going to be championing and hoping that he can sign into law? Are they only kind of climate focused, or is he kind of broadened his approach in his bid for a third term?
Well, he definitely got a big win last year with a measure that passed to move Washington to clean energy by 2045, so energy that's not dependent on carbon-emitting sources. For this year, he's going to try again to get the legislature to pass a low-carbon fuel standard, or what's also been described as a clean fuel standard, similar to what is in place in California. This has been something he's been talking about since he was first elected for his first term, but it's something he's also not given up on. So he's definitely looking for another win on his climate agenda. The other issue that he is clearly thinking about, and perhaps because of this looming election, is homelessness. So now he is proposing to tap into the state's constitutionally protected rainy day fund to free up a couple $100 million, or actually $300 million, with the goal of reducing the number of unsheltered homeless people in the state by half over the next 2 years. So that would involve spending that money on building a lot more shelter beds. It's an ambitious idea. The legislature may be cool to the notion of tapping into the rainy day fund. It does take a 60% vote to do that, but it shows that the governor is aware that perhaps if he's got a liability, it might be around that particular issue.
It's particularly interesting, Austin, because normally homelessness and those sorts of issues are the provinces of cities. You see it a lot in Seattle and Spokane and other cities around the state, and you don't really hear about it a lot as much at the state level or a governor as much championing it, and that's sort of a departure from what you normally hear about, right?
Well, certainly the state has long been involved in building affordable housing and housing for low-income people through the Housing Trust Fund. But you are right that generally homelessness is viewed as a local issue, but it has become so prevalent and such a crisis and a critical sort of state of affairs that I think it's fair to say that the legislature and the governor's hands are being forced on this. We've already seen lawmakers start to address this issue in recent years, and I think that pressure is only building on them. At this point, it feels like it is a statewide issue and that there will need to be some state help to address.
Republican Representative Matt Shea of the Spokane Valley, not the city of Spokane. He is the subject of a report that is out about his past actions. It has now been made public, and there's a lot of hand-wringing about what's going to happen to him and what he did in the past to deserve this report. We've talked about that before. We don't need to rehash it all. However, he's been kicked out of the Republican caucus, essentially barred from hanging out with his fellow Republicans in the legislature. I just wonder, is he now basically a vote and nothing else? He's not on any committees. He's not able to caucus with his fellow Republicans or anything like that. As we tape this, he's not been formally expelled from the House. He can still go there, but that could change. So other than that, what is going to happen to Matt Shea, or is it just still too soon to know?
Well, I think in many ways he is now a caucus of one. As you say, he has been suspended from the Republican caucus, so he'll have a seat on the floor. He won't be on committees. And in terms of what the legislature might do, of course, the allegations are that he has close ties to militias, that he was involved in armed standoffs around the western United States, that his activities, the investigators said, may have even constituted domestic terrorism. For his part, Shea says that this report is a sham, that that his communications have been lawful, that this is just essentially a hit piece. But you're right that there could be early in the session a pretty significant conversation about what else they might do as a result of this report. House Democrats may be interested in a vote to expel. It would take a 2/3 vote, and it does not appear that Republicans are, while they have sanctioned him, it does not appear that they are excited about the notion of taking a vote to eject him from the House chamber. There's also the possibility that he could be censured. So it is too early to say. I think this will be a topic of conversation in the initial days of the legislature, and I don't think this is the last that we've heard of that report or of Representative Shea.
Okay, so parting shot here. You've been covering the legislature for a long time, as we mentioned. I just wonder about one thing you could say you've seen change in that time, positive or negative, about the way it's covered, how you do your job, or what you've seen every January when you cover it.
Well, a couple of observations. The number of lawmakers is the same. I'm pretty sure there are more lobbyists than when I started, and there are far fewer reporters covering this place. And I often say this, that this state is growing. The budget is growing. We now have a $50 billion two-year operating budget, and there are many fewer people, reporters, journalists with eyes on this place covering what's happening. And so that's a definite trend line that jumps out at me. The other thing I've noticed, and I think is significant, is just the generational shift that's happening in this legislature. There are younger members coming in. There are a lot of new members, an extraordinary number of members who've been here for 5 years or less. It's a more diverse legislature. And so that has certainly changed the conversations that are happening. It's changed some of the legislation that's being considered. And I think it's fair to say that the legislature today does more accurately reflect the diverse population of the state of Washington. And so that sort of shift and change is something that I'm observing, especially in the last couple of years.
Well, we are certainly glad to still have your voice and your expertise there covering it for us. Thank you so much for joining us today, Austin.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
See all of Austin's reporting at nwpb.org. Thank you for joining us here in the unique Northwest.